In this video, we are going to talk about two more methods of solving quadratic equations. So we're going to pick up where we left off and start on method number 3. Method 3 is called the quadratic formula. And we have it already written out here on our notes. But notice it says that one thing has to be true first. We have to have a quadratic, and it has to be in standard form, and it has to be equal to 0. So I'm just going to jot those things down as requirements. So it must be in standard form and equal to 0. If that's the case, then we know what A, B, and C are, and we can plug in to this formula here. So this right here is the quadratic formula. And when we plug into this, we find out the solutions. So we're going to get two x values that make this equation true. So let's try this problem. We have something in standard form equal to 0, so it is ready to be solved. If it wasn't equal to 0, we could always make it equal to 0. We could move things around. We don't have to do that though. So let's identify our A, B, and C, our coefficients. We know that A is 2, B is -7. Don't forget that negative goes with the 7 there. And C is 1. Now that we have those, we can plug into our formula. So let's start that out by writing x equals. And right away, we notice that the first part of our formula starts out with -b. What that means is that we're going to change the sign of what b is. Let's make a little note there. So don't make it negative, change the sign. If it is already negative, we're going to change it to positive. So this -7 is going to become a +7. Then we have a plus minus, that's where we get our two answers from, and a big square root. Oh, this looks familiar. This is our discriminant. That's the b squared minus 4ac. So we're going to plug in the discriminant there. So b is -7. Don't forget to wrap that in parentheses when we square it. Minus 4 times a is 2, times c is 1. That's all underneath the square root. Now we're ready for the denominator. So 2a would be 2 times 2. Okay, we've plugged in to the formula, and now we want to simplify that. So I'm going to work on the discriminant first. You know what? I'm also going to make a little note here. That's our discriminant. All right, we've worked with that before. Okay. So we can type that into a calculator if we want, or we could just simplify it using order of operations. And when we do that, we get 41. And on the bottom, let's simplify that, we get 4. So notice that we get two answers. One is 7 plus the square root of 41 over 4. The other is 7 minus the square root of 41 over 4. Sometimes if we're using things like delta math, they'll let us type in both of them using the plus or minus sign, or sometimes it will ask for just one of them. So we should be able to separate these out if we needed to. I have no problem leaving my answer like this though, just realizing that this would be two real solutions because we got a positive discriminant there. And that's our quadratic formula. Okay, we have one more method to talk about. Method 4, we are going to go back to an old method of completing the square. Now we really can complete the square anytime. There's just times that it makes more sense to do it and times where it really would be annoying. So let me give you some suggestions. The first one is that it should start out in standard form. It doesn't necessarily have to be equal to 0, but it can if it is. That's totally fine. The bigger issue is this b value right here. We like to complete the square when the b is even. So here we have -6. That's an even number. This would be a good time to complete the square. I'm going to say one more thing. It's good when a is 1. Right? A is the coefficient of the x squared. All right. So let's do our work now. So when we complete the square, we split this into two groups, right? We have our x squared minus 6x. That's going to be our square group. We'll leave some space there for the number we're going to add in. And then we have the plus 3. That's the leftover group. So here we go. What's the number that will complete the square? We take half of the 6. That becomes -3. And then we square that -3 to get 9. That's the number we need to complete the square. So I'm going to add 9 to the square group and subtract it from the leftover group. That's our balance. Don't forget about the rest of this equation here. It still equals 0. But we have our two groups now, right? This group and this group. When we put this plus 9 in here, we made the square, right? So we're going to write this as a square now. This is x minus 3 squared. Remember, the trick was just to take half of that -6. We don't square it here. We just take the half. And then we put the leftovers together. That becomes -6. And now that equals 0. What we just did was go from standard form into vertex form. And when we're in vertex form, we're actually back to method 2, which is getting x by itself. So that's what we're going to do now. We are going to use method number 2, get x by itself, or solve for x. So here we go. We're going to add 6 to both sides. So now we just have x minus 3 squared on the left and 6 on the right. And here's where we take that square root and get two numbers. Remember we did that last video? When we take the square root of a square, this cancels out with the square and we're left with just the x minus 3. But when we take the square root of 6, we get plus root 6 and we get minus root 6. So we put our plus minus in front of that answer. Just like in the quadratic formula, we had that plus minus. And then the last step would be to add 3. But remember, we like to write that with the 3 in front here and then the plus minus root 6. And those would be our two real answers, just like that. So now we've gone through 4 different methods to solve quadratic equations. When you go to solve, you have to decide what's the best method. Good luck with that.